Hello there, and welcome to Playtime Online. This is the Institute of Play's webinar series that allows us to connect and share our work with you. I'm Amna Siddiqui, the producer and moderator of this program. Today is a special day. It's Digital Learning Day, which celebrates innovative teaching and learning through digital media and technology. We'll be marking the occasion with an exclusive first look at two significant products being developed at GlassLab. The first is SimCity EDU, which is an online community where teachers can create and share learning tools for SimCity in the classroom. We'll also be discussing a SimCity mod prototype, a brand new game-based assessment tool being developed specifically for use in schools. As a reminder, today's Playtime speakers want your feedback on the new SimCity prototype, so feel free to submit comments throughout the duration of this webinar. So happy Digital Learning Day to everyone. And now let's meet today's speakers. Could everybody briefly introduce themselves and their connection with these two educational products? Malcolm, do you want to start?
Hi, I'm Malcolm Bauer. I'm the Assessment Director at GlassLab, and I'm working on the assessment and learning portions especially for the two things we'll be talking about.
Great, and MJ?
Hi, I'm MJ. I'm the game director for GlassLab for all the products we're building.
Awesome. And we also have Stone here, but I don't see him. So Tomas, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I am Tomas. I am the technical director here at GlassLab.
Great. Thanks, guys. And I guess Stone will introduce himself when he's back. I'd like to remind our viewers that if at any point you'd like to ask today's speakers a question or submit your feedback, just click on the blue participate text under this video on the right-hand side. We'll be spending the last 15 minutes or so of the webinar answering your questions and discussing your feedback during our Q&A portion. So let's begin today's discussion talking about GlassLab. MJ, could you walk us through how GlassLab was formed and what you're setting out to accomplish with this lab?
Yeah, for sure. GlassLab is kind of a unique thing because it's a partnership sort of above all other things. So it's not only an institute of play, but also involves electronic arts, the ESA, which is the trade organizations for video games. It's supported by both the Gates and the MacArthur Foundations. And then we also have a number of other partnerships as well, most notably with ETS, Educational Testing Services, which is how we got Malcolm to be part of the team. So it's a lot of different entities that have come together under this idea of creating really high-quality games that also include assessment, because we think those are two really, really interesting things to try. So the things that we're going to show today kind of illustrate that collision we're trying to create between taking commercial games that are really, really cool and really awesome, and then putting together with assessment and very specific learning goals. Great.
And I just briefly want to touch on why haven't we seen video games like SimCity integrated into school curricula before?
Well, there's a couple of different answers to that. One is that we have, and from history from Maxis, we know that in fact SimCity is one of the games that's been used in classrooms a lot over the years. But it's kind of anecdotal where emails have come in or people have sent letters, that sort of thing, saying, hey, I love SimCity, I use it in my classroom, but it's never been done in sort of a systematic or organized way. So they are in the classroom. Also there's some really cool stuff with Valve's Portal 2 game that's being done in classrooms, but it's not very much. Most of what you see in classroom as far as games is pretty low-tech games, mostly running in Flash, that sort of thing. That there's kind of a big differential between what kids see in those games versus what they see at home when they go play the commercial games. And so that's where the Glass project is unique by saying, well, let's take those commercial games and see how those play out in a classroom setting.
Awesome. So Malcolm, thinking about what GlassLab is doing, repurposing a classic video game as a classroom teaching tool, could you talk about how video games have the potential to change the way we measure student learning and assessment in the classroom?
I'd be happy to, and I'll build a little bit upon what MJ was saying. GlassLab is focused very much on the use of formative assessment. So assessment to support learning in the classroom. And I have some slides to go through for that. If that's okay, I'll put that on screen share.
Sure.
Get this right. Okay. Sorry, just taking a second to do that. Okay, so why game-based formative assessment? So most people, many people think of assessment as a thing, like a test, but formative assessment is really a process that teachers and students go through to support instruction, and it's the idea of teachers collecting evidence on an ongoing basis and using that to provide feedback and to adjust instruction, and for students to take an active role in that process. In talking with MJ and others, we've seen a lot of similarities between that process and aspects of a video game. So here's a definition of some features of video games from Tim Skelly, 1994. The first step is to present a goal, and that's part of presenting for teachers and students understanding common expectations. Then giving clear-cut feedback to move to help with progress towards the goal, and then constantly adjusting the challenges, constantly adjusting instruction for that purpose. And so there's this very nice parallel between many aspects of video games and formative assessment practices. So I thought I'd be a little bit more specific about that. There are 5 research-based formative assessment practices that have been articulated. And just to make the connections clear, I'll be talking about each one and then giving the game design parallel to that. So one practice is that teachers should elicit evidence of student learning at many different time scales, minute to minute, day by day, week to week. They really want to get a sense of what students are knowing and can do, but there's very different kinds of levels of that. Similarly, games do that typically through telemetrics and analytics. And so this is an example from StarCraft that is known for collecting lots of information, and for the community around StarCraft to make use of that to help define what is a good StarCraft player, and to talk about the kinds of skills of learning that they need to move forward. So there's a very natural parallel there. Second practice is that teachers identify and share learning expectations with their students. So there's a transparency that students should know what their goal is, what they're trying to do, and teachers should know that as well, so they can work together to support learning. And so in games, that's just very common. I mean, games provide explicit challenges and goals in the form of missions and other very explicit representations where students players can go through and check off when they're completed, or the game knows when they've completed and then moves them forward. Third practice is that teachers structure opportunities for students to take ownership of their own learning. So a piece of this, you'll see this is not like, it's very clear this is not just a test as an assessment. Practice is really having students begin to take ownership of their learning, take responsibility for their learning, and that's part of the whole aspect of formative assessment. Games do this as well, so they provide choice and flexible pacing. Here's an example from Minecraft as well, known for that kind of structure, that they can take ownership of their own creation, what they do and what they learn. The fourth one is that teachers can structure opportunities to activate students as instructional resources for one another. So students help each other, help each other learn, and maybe compare what they're doing and learn from each other. Games do that very naturally through structured context for collaboration and sharing and multiplayer platforms. So here's a Little Big Planet as an example of that kind of platform that supports that sort of learning. Lastly, teachers provide feedback to move learning forward and create a structure for students to act on it. That's a major piece of formative assessment, providing feedback so students can know what to do next to improve. That's just a very central part of games. So they provide just-in-time feedback linked to rewards to help players progress in the game. So just to summarize, on the left of this slide, you can see there are those 5 practices, and there are very clear parallels that game designers have developed over the years and have a lot of know-how to help to work on this. And so coupled with that is all the engagement aspects that come with this. And so we think that for formative assessment, there's a lot to be learned from game designers, and a lot of the affordances of games can really help improve the use of formative assessment practices in the classroom. Thanks, Anna. Oops.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so I think Stone just joined us. Hi, Stone. Can you?
Yes. Hello. Can you hear me okay?
Hi. Yes. Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Great.
Great. So could you briefly introduce yourself? Everybody did.
Yes, I'm the lead designer on the newest SimCity game, and we've been working on this one for about 3 years now. So it'll be coming out in about a month, and we hope to also get this as part of the program, that people will be able to use this in the classrooms as well as just an entertainment project. We hope that it's also educational as well.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us. Okay, so I guess jumping back into the conversation, I want to start getting more specific about these two products that we're discussing, SimCity EDU and the game-based assessment tool, the SimCity mod. One's a community for teachers, while the other is a modded SimCity game. And I'm wondering if, MJ, if you could discuss these two products in more detail, and if you're able to kind of talk about their relationship and differences.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. The first thing that I'm going to go over, and I actually have some nice pictures here, is the SimCity EDU website, and it's a website, not a sort of anything like a full product. But this will be a website that launches the same day as the commercial game that Stone's working on, and this is to address kind of a cool need that I referred to a little bit before, but we know that teachers have used SimCity in the classroom before, but there's not a community necessarily around that's organized that says this is some cool ways to use SimCity. You can certainly find some great lessons online if you Google it that are really interesting, but this will be a way to sort of compile them into one space and have them there. So obviously what you're seeing here is it's just a mock-up. This isn't the full website. We're in development on it, but the homepage will look like this and have some something that's featured that we think is cool. And then as we go into it, this is what a typical lesson might look like, or a unit. And there's a lot of features. I'm not going to go over them all here in detail, but you should be able to, we consulted with some teachers and some other people that have created lesson plans around what would be a really great way to organize the setup and the execution of a lesson that uses SimCity in the classroom. And again, this is assuming that you're using the real commercial product just like it was released to the public. This would be a way of browsing. So we want you to be able to search, let's say, by a certain Common Core standard, or a certain topic area, or a certain grade level, or maybe some combination of those. We're going to actually launch it with some content already in there, some lessons of folks that we've sought out who are really excited to create some lessons around SimCity. And then beyond that, if I go to the next example, this is a template that'll be available to anybody in the public who wants to create their own lesson and publish it almost like you might publish a recipe online or something like that. This is how I used SimCity. This is the standards that are applicable. You can upload images. So it's going to be a really, really neat and we think really useful tool for creating community around the use of the commercial game really right when it launches, rather than over some long period of time when it might come into use. So that is SimCity EDU. I'll switch back. The next thing that we're doing, which is actually completely separate from this, is to take the game SimCity, Stone's game, and modify it so that it does something really specific. And we're really very much in the early days on that particular part of the project. But it's incredibly exciting. And I mentioned at the very beginning that this is a partnership that includes EA, and one of the really important things that EA has done is to give GlassLab source code access to SimCity, which means we can really make SimCity something that's quite customized to what we want to do around a certain lesson or a certain competency or a certain assessment. And like I mentioned, I want to caveat that what you're going to see is really early and is more a demonstration of what we can do than what we will do. But Tomas, if you're ready, I'd love to have you walk through what we've done as a mod to SimCity to show specifically how we've structured a progression that's designed for use within this small, maybe 20-minute use in a classroom, as opposed to the real game, which is a much, much bigger experience than that.
Okay, so to do that, I think I want to share my screen. Let me see if I can get that going. Okay, so this is the actual mode that we did. And you can see it's a small city that we have put together. And if you know, you have seen some of the presentation of SimCity before, you will notice that a lot of the icons of the regular SimCity is gone. So we really wanted to give like a really small piece for students to just focus on and rather than the whole game. And over here you can see it's a small town with a residential area over here, an industrial area, and then some utilities like water and sewer. Here in the town hall, for instance, GlassLab have created as a mission which will introduce the students to this town. And basically, this mission is just telling the student that there is a problem in the town, and they need to research why the town is having all these problems. So the students is going to go around maybe to the water tower and ask the water tower Sim, hey, what's going on over here? And the water tower Sim will say, you know, everything is going well, nothing going on. So a student can say, okay, so here doesn't seem to be a trouble. So they can go to the industrial area and ask to industrial people what's going on. And then they are complaining, hey, we don't have power, we cannot work here, if you don't change this, we are going to go away. And you can say, okay, fine. So maybe power could be an issue. Then you go to the homes, and there you see somebody complaining, hey, we don't have powers, we are using candles, I cannot cook at home, please get us power. Okay, so maybe power seems to be an issue in the town. So let me ask another Sim to verify that. And again, they are complaining about power. So as a student, I say, okay, let me go back to town hall and report my findings. And the town hall says, okay, so yeah, indeed, power seems to be a problem. So why we don't go ahead and build a power plant? You say, okay. So a new icon for the students has come up, which is about power. And here, the student is presented with 3 different types of power sources. One is coal, which costs a certain amount of money. And then there is wind, which has the benefit that doesn't pollute, but you know, you need wind in your town. Then there is solar, which doesn't pollute again, but it needs the sun. So this is, so me, I'm going to build a solar plant, and then once you build the solar plant, you understand that in fact you need to build more stuff in the solar plant. So one of the things that you need to build is the panels actual to collect the actual electricity. So the actual energy, sorry, not electricity. So you build the panels, and now you can see kind of the electricity flowing through the city. And this is actually a good opportunity for the teacher to kind of explain the students that electricity doesn't move like this, that this is actually a simulation. And that, and anyways, it creates opportunities for the teachers to comment on the experience. While our city is going on, we created another tool which collects information about what is going on in the town. We call it Pegasus, but this is just a code name, not the real name. And for instance, we can see how much money the town has, and the students can see, at the beginning of the town, the factories and stuff, they were making money. I had some money in the town, and all of a sudden I lost a lot of money. And the reason why I lost all this money is because I built that power, the solar power plant, right? Then I lost a little bit more money, and that's because I bought the panels themselves. Another thing that you can look, for instance, is how much power is the power plant creating. And you can see at the beginning there was no power in the city, and then we built the power plant, and then it started to create electricity. And then over here we can see how much power is consumed. So the red says how much power is consumed. It means the city is consuming actually less power than we are actually producing. As this goes on, these graphs will start showing the students of course, at nighttime, there is no power in the city. So they're going to be able to figure it out that by looking at the graph especially. And then they can build the reasons of why, for instance, they want to invest additional money to buy the batteries and such. So at the end of the class, they can create this very nice presentation about their city and how they went about solving their problem. And they can explain the decisions is actually based on evidence collected by watching their simulation. So that's all.
Great, thanks, Tomas. Malcolm, do you have, I think you want to talk about some specifics of learning and assessment around what we just saw?
Yes, thanks, Elma. I'd like to highlight some of the ideas for learning and assessment, some of the potential we see in SimCity in general, and specifically in the mod that we're getting to work on. These, again, we're at an early stage of this work, so it's not like this is at all final. But we've been exploring the tremendous potential we see in SimCity in general, and we've taken just a few of those ideas to begin to explore forward for the mod. And so we've chosen to see how we can support aspects of science learning initially, and we're specifically interested in something called socio-scientific reasoning, which is the connection between understanding and reasoning in science and its impact and connections to societal issues. We are interested in scientific argumentation, and in that sense looking at the kinds of evidence one could gather. And so the tool that Tomas mentioned is the beginning of something we were using to basically gather data from SimCity and then interpret it, and then use that data in the construction of arguments that may satisfy a mission or a policy issue someone's thinking about. And lastly, we're also interested in scientific modeling. So there's tremendous numbers of complicated dynamics in a city, and we're looking at having kids model really represent their understanding of some of the relationships they see, and then use that evidence tool to support or refute their position and then revise it accordingly. Along with that, we are incorporating principles of formative assessment in the game, so ideas of feedback, ownership of learning, connections of different people working on different ideas, working together in different ways. And we're also doing it in the game, but also thinking about this as a community and a classroom ecosystem where there are teachers and students or in an after-school program. And so there's also activities surrounding this on formative assessment that might occur outside of the game. But the whole idea is to use SimCity and the SimCity mod as a platform for scaffolding formative assessment and learning for science understanding, and especially the areas of science understanding that have been traditionally harder to get across in a classroom.
Great, thank you. Stone, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, so the game that we have, one of the big features about it with the multiplayer content that we have, or the multiplayer capabilities, is that a teacher, for instance, could make a whole region, a group of cities, and then transfer those to different students within the school. So you could set up a certain starting point, make a problem, have the kids take over the cities for a certain while and solve those problems, or you could pass them off from one student to the next as they start to move around and develop up the city over time and watch it evolve. So we really tried hard to make stories happen out of the cities. It's not just about placing a whole bunch of buildings and then being done with the activity. It's about how the citizens react to the things that you built into the city.
Great. Okay, so I guess my next question for you guys is we've seen both of these works in progress, and I'm wondering what's left to do. What are the next steps for both?
Well, for the SimCity EDU website, like I said, we're gathering some lesson plans that we can launch with the website, and then just getting that up and ready to go in concert with the commercial product, which we're really excited about. And one of the things that Stone mentioned that I think is really going to be interesting is the multiplayer features, and just seeing how people are going to choose to use the multiplayer features of the commercial game will be really exciting. And then on the mods, we've got really just a lot of work to do to figure out, especially the assessment piece. These game-based assessments, as we're calling them, need to have a lot of automated stuff going on in the background that's letting us know how the students are doing, what they're up to within these given activities. So we have to put a lot of work into that part of the process, as well as making the mod itself.
Cool. So do you guys have any more things to add? I think I want to go on into the Q&A and feedback portion. That's it? All right, great. So let's jump into the Q&A portion. I'll be also reading some of your feedback, and what we're going to do, Stone, MJ, Malcolm, and Tomas will all kind of discuss amongst themselves live. So that should be very interesting. So the first question comes from Mar, and he asks, this appears to be a rather isolating experience. Is there a way to use SimCity in a collaborative way within a classroom?
Okay, yeah, I could answer that one. It kind of touches on what I just talked about a moment ago. But since the game is designed to be multiplayer, if you have more than one computer in your classroom, then of course the students could be on it at the same time, talking back and forth to each other in the room while they're playing the game. If you only had one computer in the classroom, then we found even around the office, like passing that city off from one person to the next, or having groups of people sit together and kind of discuss how they're going to make it, it can be very collaborative and engaging that way, even with one computer. Another thing that you could do if you only had one computer in the classroom, you could have the students have multiple cities, and even though only one city could be played at a time, the students could be jumping in, taking over their city for some amount of time, then leaving and transferring it to the next student to work on their city. So I think there's a lot of different ways to have a pretty rich collaboration within our game, as it is right now. Of course, the best way would be to have multiple computers, and everybody would just be live all the time.
Great. Does anybody want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I'll just say a couple of words. So science as a practice is typically a very collaborative activity. And so we can see within a multiplayer context in the game or outside of the game in the classroom, but with part of the game, students having differing opinions and different arguments about specific phenomena that they're exploring in the game, and then having really elevating the science discourse about this. So rather than thinking about the teacher as an authority figure on science, really having scientific debates about the nature of evidence and science, but using SimCity as a context for doing that.
Great. So I'm going to move on to the next question, and it is from John, and he asks, will teachers be able to create our own modded scenarios with the mod tools? If so, how flexible are the tools?
Yeah, I can take that one. And we've heard this request before, and unfortunately the answer really is no. The mods that we're creating are really at a pretty deep level. and there isn't a tool that we could distribute that would work with that. But it definitely sounds like a terrific idea. But at least for this project, that's not part of our roadmap.
Okay, and the next question comes from Justin, and he is one of the students at Quest to Learn, which is a middle school and high school in New York City. And he is curious about when SimCity EDU will be released for students and school use, and what are the differences between the normal SimCity and this new SimCity EDU, and also what happened to Spore.
I would say that first of all, the SimCity EDU is kind of, this can be, and I understand this is confusing. That's actually the teacher community website. So we're not, the mod is just right now. It's just a prototype. It's just a thing that we've been kind of messing around with. It isn't something that has a product name or anything like that. And so when you think of SimCity EDU, that is the game, the whole game as you would normally play it. Although, as Stone was describing, there's a lot of ways that a teacher could sort of set everything up in a way that's very specific for the students. So our hope there is that as teachers share this information with each other on how to set it up and make things work, in a specific way, like that students will start seeing, these setups repeated toward a specific learning goal. So that would be the difference, I guess I would say.
Okay, and the next question is from Brandon, and he asks, what is the biggest challenge in viably bringing high-quality educational games to scale?
Actually, I have one comment about that, which doesn't directly answer the question, but I find it kind of interesting, is that when we set out to build SimCity, our goal was to make an entertainment project that would reach as many people as possible. And so I think it's kind of interesting that even though we set out to make an entertainment product, we grounded it with a lot of educational background and studies when we were building up the product. So it's kind of bringing this, a game this big to an educational market kind of happened because we weren't directly targeting the educational market. We were targeting a much bigger market outside of that. So I think that's one way of trying to reach bigger audiences as far as educational software goes, is not just to focus on that one niche market, but to try to broaden your perspective and try to get it to reach even more people.
Great, and does anybody have would anybody like to add to that? Okay, so the next question is from Chris, and he's teaching a disasters class, and he'd like to know how he can implement various disasters with maximum educational outcomes, and also be able to not force students to start over from scratch each time.
Stone, you want to talk about disasters? That's always a fun one.
Yeah, so with the disasters in our game right now, you would just have to have the disasters that came with the game. You wouldn't be able to create your own disasters. So you would just have to use what's in the box at this point in time. I mean, one of the things I find kind of interesting about disasters is that they do destroy the city, and it is kind of a permanent, or you feel the impact of it. If you could just reload over again, doesn't really seem like a lesson about disasters. A big part about disasters is to figure out how to rebuild from what just happened. So at least in that respect, I think there's actually more educational value in trying to figure out how to recover from the disaster than the actual event of the disaster itself.
The next question is from Deborah, and she asks, will it be available in Spanish? And I kind of want to make this question wider. Is it going to be available in any other languages other than English?
Yes, it is available. Well, the game itself is available in many different languages. I'm not sure with the SimCity EDU, though.
Yeah, we don't have specific plans about taking the website beyond English, but that's definitely we will want to do that.
Okay, and then another question is from Omar. What could we learn with SimCity EDU? Could it be useful for a programmer student?
But I think one of the things that's really interesting about SimCity is that it's a system, and it's always been very clear about the fact that it's a system, and I would say the latest SimCity is even more clear about that fact. And when we think about the types of thinking, and like systems thinking is the label we give to it, that are really useful for things like programming. I mean, it's an abstract thing, so it's not like you're going to go in and program SimCity, but the understanding of the cause and effect relationships within the pieces of SimCity, I think is really valuable for someone that might be looking into that space.
Okay, and the next question is from Jane, and she asks, will there be a feature to remix the lessons shared on SimCity EDU?
That's a good question. There isn't a specific feature for that, but we certainly want people to be able to take what they have and whatever way you might have used a lesson. The publishing tools are supposed to be are designed to be very usable and easy to create your own and share it under your own identity and say this is mine.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. So Scott asks, he says he teaches engineering, and he wants to know if there's any chance that the game would teach the engineering method and aspects of civil engineering.
Let me take that. I think it depends on what grade level or course if we're talking, but it really could apply to all of them, I think. Certainly there is an aspect of engineering design. If you think about designing a city or a town, a lot of the skills that are involved in deciding on what your criteria are and design under constraints and doing some engineering modeling to make decisions about design are very much natural connections to using the game for that purpose. So I think there's a lot of potential for that, both in terms of the design aspects, but also the modeling and support decisions for that piece of it.
Okay, the next question is from Julie. Do you have plans to modify any other commercial games for educational purposes?
Yeah, I can take that one, and the answer is definitely yes. When GlassLab was formed with this initial partnership, one of our goals was to say that a lot of different commercial games have the potential to be used in this exact way. Right now we happen to be using SimCity for a variety of reasons, one just being that it's awesome. But definitely our goal is to take other games, maybe even from other companies, and blend them into the work that Glass does to make these game-based assessments.
Okay, the next question is from Matt. I am a careers teacher. I would like to use SimCity to introduce different jobs to my students. What types of jobs introduced in SimCity can the students interact and learn about?
Yeah, I can talk about that. There's a lot of jobs in the game. So we have all the basic services of a city. So police, fire, ambulance, doctors, teachers, mayors, politicians, all of that are part of the basic infrastructure of the game. Then there's a whole system within the game that the Sims themselves, they all need a job. And those jobs have different wealth levels. They have different types of buildings, prefer different types of workers over others. So every store needs workers, every factory needs workers, and they need them at different wealth levels. So we try to usually balance it out to say, like, at the top there's only a few very high-paid managers, then there's the middle tier of like middle management, and then at the bottom is janitors and cashiers and things like that. So in just talking about social structures of jobs, I think there's a lot there to talk about without even getting into a very specific job, just different ways that careers can be formed in the game. The other thing we have is the education system, where the more education you have will give you different types of jobs as well. So that would be another talking point for our careers class.
Great. Okay. Let's see here. Sorry that we have a lot of questions, and I'm just trying to make sure we get to all of them. Okay, this is a pretty straightforward question. This is from Bob. He asks, will the iPad platform be supported?
What we're showing right now is it's a PC and Mac. Like SimCity is currently designated for PC and Macintosh.
Okay, and then this next question is from John, and he asks, how would teachers be able to create one of these multiplayer, multi-city regions? Would there be a sandbox mode to enable teachers to create such maps?
Yes, you can't create the region map, the terrain itself, but there is a sandbox mode which lets you create any type of city that you wanted to. So you could go into sandbox mode, pick one of the existing regions that comes with the game. We have a variety. Some are more like Midwest plains that are very flat. Some are more like islands, more mountainous terrains as well. So you would pick the one that you wanted, and then you would go into the different cities and you could set them up. So you could say this city is all about power, this city is all about water, this city is all about jobs, and then set them up in that way.
Great. Okay, so we have another disasters question. What disasters will be packaged, and will the underlying geologic, etc. causes be identified? Can one student city be destroyed by an earthquake and the others rally to help them rebuild?
So the real disasters in the game are earthquakes and tornadoes are the two that are really based on real world. We also have some more humorous ones, some that we haven't quite announced yet, but like for instance a UFO attack. There's also meteor strikes, things that you don't see too often in the real world. But when a disaster does happen, it will cause fires and it will cause injuries. And in that case, other students or other cities would send in their fire trucks, they would send in their ambulances. We had, in one case, there was a nuclear meltdown that happened in the office, and it wiped out some guy's city, but he found that everybody else came in from their cities to help work and kind of restart his town back up again, since he had lost a lot of his population. So there is definitely a cross between the cities as events happen like that.
And the next question is from Francisco. And he asks, how will the formative assessments be embedded into the game in terms of UI? Will you have plugins, teacher dashboards, etc.?
Yeah, I can take that. Definitely. Well, UI is one of the big challenges around the formative assessment piece. And we definitely think of different audiences. So one audience is the student who's playing, that the game would be giving good feedback around specific learning that we're hoping, or competencies that we're hoping that they learn. The second part of the question is about teacher dashboards, which is something we're giving actually a lot of thought to. We've been doing some interviews with teachers and even some classroom observation to kind of get a sense of what would be the most effective type of dashboard. So a lot of the products that you already see in school do have teacher dashboards that tend to not really seem to give the teachers the information that they're looking for in the sort of timely fashion that they're looking for. So we're going to be investing a lot in how we think about how this assessment data is surfaced both to the player, student, but also to the teacher.
Great, and I think this question is also, it's similar, but how do you plan to measure the educational outcomes of SimCity being used in the classroom? How will you identify best practices?
So there are a couple of ways we're looking at that. One is, first of all, we're designing SimCity very carefully from, not SimCity, excuse me, I apologize. We're designing the mod specifically to include best practices of assessment design. So drawing upon ETS's experience and other companies as well, like Pearson, who were involved also. We're looking into latest research on what are good ways of measuring specific kinds of constructs, science standards, and the underlying cognitive mechanisms that that kids engage in to achieve those. And so we're looking at those and thinking about the kinds of evidence we would need to make inferences about whether they have achieved those skills or not, and then what sorts of tasks or kinds of activities within the model we can create to elicit that evidence. So there's a careful design from an assessment standpoint to make sure that the evidence that we're getting is of the nature we need to make the inferences that we care about. The other piece of that is, so that's part of the design, and then there's evidence that we collect through play, through the use of the mod at different stages of the development process. So smaller numbers initially and then larger numbers eventually, to make sure that the underlying inference mechanisms, the algorithms, are making the kinds of decisions and providing the kinds of feedback that we expect them to make. The last level, which I think the person was referring to, was then talking about, well, okay, so let's say it measures the kind of things you want it to, but what kind of educational impact will it actually have? And that is a broader question that's typically done in kind of like a program evaluation. So you could liken that to if you were starting a new curriculum with new textbooks, what would the impact be of that? And those are typically much larger studies that are, while they're not specifically in the scope of this particular project, we are working with other folks that are beginning to think about how we might design those. I think we need to see early on, first of all, how SimCity, the mod, and SimCity Edu is going to be used to look at what are some common patterns, and then decide from those basic patterns, those basic uses, which are the ones that are most likely to be very effective, and then design some kind of study to look at the educational impact. But until we see more about how much it's being used and how it's being used, that evaluating the impact will be a little early, even for the first couple of years after, well, the first year or two after release, I'd say.
Does anybody want to add to that, or did he cover it? Okay, all right. So the next question is from John, and he asks, how might SimCity EDU be used to promote environmental awareness in city planning? His fourth graders are in a unit involving alternate energy and environmental consciousness.
Yeah. So I could talk about it from the game perspective, and then if somebody else wants to talk about it from the EDU perspective. But it's almost impossible to play the game right now and not get an environmental awareness because the systems all kind of tell you what's going on with them. And we tried purposely not to put in, there's an answer to these problems. For instance, there's a water system, and it's not just that everybody has to drink water, but that everybody creates sewage after they're done using the water. And then that sewage has to be placed somewhere. Water gets returned back when it rains at certain times of the year. And so you learn about the water cycle just by playing the game, and you have to have an understanding of it to know where to set up all of the different parts of your city with the water filtration units and the sewage plants and things like that. In the same way with electricity and power. So as was mentioned earlier, you don't just solve the world's problems by putting down a solar plant because the sun doesn't shine all the time, and you can't just put down wind because the wind doesn't blow all the time. So as you experiment with these different systems, you learn the pros and cons of each of them, and I think that's a very powerful way of learning about this without directly like giving a lecture about it. It's more subtle, but you can't ignore it in the game.
Yeah, I completely agree with Stone, and to build upon that, the kinds of specifics he talked about are instantiations of systems thinking, which is very much part of thinking about large systems and how they're connected, and SimCity has all that in it. It's a very neat, complicated environmental system built into it. And so the idea of thinking about stacks and flows, there are effects that have delayed, there are actions that have delayed effects, and you